Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you may be joining us from. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day, your evening, your night to join us. My name is Jennifer O'Donoghue. I'm a senior fellow and deputy director of the Center for Universal Education at Brookings, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this kickoff event of our annual Research and Policy Symposium on Gender Equality in and through education. This year's theme, Building Just Futures with Girls, Teachers, and Communities, comes at a time when many regions around the world, including in the US where I sit today, are facing a growing anti-gender agenda and a backlash against the rights of girls, women, and gender nonconforming people. Initiatives and programs that promote gender equality in and through education are facing growing challenges, including political and legal restrictions and associated reductions in financing. These are reshaping the landscape that young people, teachers, communities, and policymakers must navigate in their efforts toward gender justice. In this complex climate, working in partnership with young people, with teachers, families, and communities is more important than ever to ensure that gender equality efforts are grounded in the lived knowledge and realities, adapted to local needs and priorities, and oriented towards expanding justice for all. In today's plenary conversation, we will hear from the 2025 Echidna Global Scholars, who will share lessons they have learned in their research exploring justice-oriented, skills-based education in post-conflict northern Uganda, strengthening pathways and promoting the agency of Indigenous women teachers in Argentina, examining gender-responsive pedagogy within Zimbabwe's education system, and advancing a community-rooted framework to engage and promote the leadership of girls in rural Zambia. Started in 2012, the Echidna Global Scholars Program aims to strengthen the capacity of local leaders to drive evidence-based change in gender equality in and through education in the Global South and around the world. The program begins with a 6-month fellowship at Brookings, during which time the scholars pursue individual research focused on improving learning opportunities and life outcomes for girls, young women, and gender nonconforming people in their local contexts, strengthen their leadership and evidence-based policy skills, build substantive knowledge on gender and global education issues, and expand their skills and pathways for strategic impact. Upon completion of the fellowship, the scholars transition to the Echidna Global Scholars Alumni Network, where we continue to work together collaboratively to promote significant, sustained, and collective influence on gender equality in education locally, regionally, and globally. Since its inception in 2012, the Echidna Global Scholars Program has hosted 14 cohorts of fellows. This is our 14th cohort, and serves an alumni network of 48 scholars from 25 different countries. It truly is my great pleasure and privilege to get to spend my days learning with and from this group of powerful leaders. I also want to take advantage of this moment to let all of you joining us know that applications for the 2026 cohort of Echidna Global Scholars is now open and will be open through December 15th. So we're in the last 2 weeks. If you are or know of someone who is a mid-career professional working in gender equality and education, looking to expand your impact, please consider applying. You can find more information on our website or contact us at echidnaglobal@brookings.edu for more information. And finally, before we turn to the conversation, I would like to invite you to share your questions and comments throughout this plenary by emailing them to us at events@brookings.edu. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for, we turn to our panel conversation with the 2025 Echidna Global Scholars. Joining us today is Faith Nkala. Faith brings 20 years of experience transforming education across Africa. As Director for Sub-Saharan Africa at Education Development Trust, Faith works closely with governments to strengthen teacher development and promote gender-inclusive classrooms where every child can thrive. A passionate advocate for girls' education and women's empowerment, Faith combines deep expertise with a collaborative approach that drives lasting change. Her leadership continues to shape policies and programs that ensure no learner is left behind. Welcome, Faith, and thank you for joining us. Our second scholar is Betty Akulo. Betty is the Executive Director of Women and Rural Development Networks, WORDUDET, a women's rights organization she founded in 2003 to help women and girls rebuild their lives in northern Uganda after conflict. Betty is a human rights lawyer and an advocate with over 20 years of experience. She specializes in gender equality, peace building, and legal protection for women. Her leadership has driven programs on economic empowerment, climate resilience, and gender-based violence. Betty is recognized as a national gender champion in Uganda and continues to amplify women's voices locally and globally. Welcome, Betty, and thank you for joining us here. Our third scholar is Zainab Gates. Zainab is an educational researcher with 20 years of experience working across Latin America. She currently serves as Senior Research and Teacher Training Coordinator at the Center for Research and Education for Development, or CRED, where she leads an international collaborative action research project on teacher training for transformation. Zainab is a proud member of the Wichi Winayak people and brings a unique perspective to her work championing gender equality and Indigenous knowledge and education. She holds a PhD in education from the University of California at San Diego. Welcome, Zainab. Gracias por estar aquí. And rounding out our panel today is Rachel Calava. Rachel is a recent PhD graduate from the University of Toronto, specializing in women and gender studies and international development education. She founded the Zambian Women Institute for Leadership and Learning, ZAMWIL, leading Ubuntu-centered programs that empower women and girls through mentorship, STEM, entrepreneurship, and sports. Her work spans equity-focused education, Indigenous knowledge systems, and decolonial leadership. Rachel is passionate about community-driven change, as you will hear today, and her research and advocacy champion girls' education and leadership across Africa and the diaspora. Welcome, Rachel, and thank you for being here. Well, thank you, everyone. I think I said quite a mouthful about each of you, and there's much more to be said, and really excited to hear from you rather than hear me talking about you. So to start our conversation today, could each of you briefly introduce your research, tell us a little bit about how or why you became interested in this topic, and share why this is a critical question for advancing gender equality and working towards just futures in your context and globally. And Betty, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Jennifer, for that warm introduction. I feel privileged to be sitting in this space with my colleagues to share more about our research. My research is inspired by my work with girls and women in the post-conflict northern Uganda, where I've seen how girls who face systematic barriers compounded by the impact of conflict experience challenges in this community. Girls face teenage pregnancy, early marriage, poverty, and restricted gender norms that continues to limit and to shape their education journeys. Even when girls go to school, the education system doesn't prepare them well enough to face real challenges in the community or where they live. It does not give them practical skills or the agency they need to rebuild their lives, knowing very well that they have compounded problems that overlap. One girl can be experiencing gender-based violence. She's married off. She's having a lot of challenges. So even when she goes to school, the education system does not prepare her to handle these challenges that she faces in her day-to-day life. These gaps led me to ask questions. What kind of education are these girls getting in these schools when they go to school? What is happening in the schools? So my study explores what a justice-oriented, skill-based education model could look like, grounded on the experiences of these girls that I'm talking about, who face systemic barriers. So this is the study I'm looking at, to find out how the barriers, how the education system can strengthen their agency and center their aspirations. So the question is very important because it is essential for advancing gender equality, because education that ignores realities of girls cannot transform their futures. In northern Uganda, for example, and globally, context-responsive, gender-based learning has the potential to break these barriers that I've talked about: poverty, expanding opportunities for these girls, and helping young girls, I've talked about, to shape their futures and to have better and just sustainable futures. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
hand
Betty.
over to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Betty. Faith, over to you.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate the warm introduction. Indeed, it has been an honor to be part of the Echidna Scholars Program for the past 6 months. In my current work with Education Development Trust, we are implementing a large-scale teacher professional development program, which is focusing on strengthening continuous professional development of teachers and their supervisors for effective classroom delivery. And this is all towards the big 2030 agenda in the SDG 4 ambition. This program has allowed me enough time to observe closely what's been transpiring in the classrooms in terms of implementation of gender responsive teaching practices and other wider efforts to make quality education available for every learner. Zimbabwe's commitment actually towards this is very evident through its strong policy frameworks and various education reforms which it has been embarking on. But more still needs to be done in terms of implementation in the classrooms. We have made some progress towards our SDG 4 indicators, but even with those lots of efforts, we are just above the 50% mark towards the targets which we have set for ourselves. So in my research, I am seeking to understand how this commitment we have as a country in making gender equality, quality education, equitable education a reality for every child, translating into practice through examining the gender responsive pedagogy implementation by teachers. So this is all I've been doing in the past 6 months, Jen.
I love how you say that's all you've been doing. You've been doing quite a bit in the past 6 months. Thank you. Thank you, Faith. Rachel, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane, and thank you to my colleagues, Faith and Betty, in terms of just following up when we're talking about, this last 6 months. They've mentioned about context responsive and SDG 4 Agenda 2030. And I'm looking at it in my own journey where I have been working in the area of research and in community. For over 10 years, I have worked across Zambia and the continent on girls and women's leadership. I've had the opportunity to work with different organizations, supporting leadership development, from increasing girls' access to secondary school to mentorship out of school girls, and also programming on strengthening women's leadership. I also looked through in my own journey with my research where I was looking at the focus on Zambian women leadership. And then coming to this question, which is very critical at this time, Zambia has made progress on gender and education policies. And this is something that I really want to appreciate. But what I've kept seeing was a gap between how girls are already practicing leadership in their everyday and how our systems do not fully recognize or value it. And then through this, questioning, my research examines how rural adolescent girls define, practice, and experience leadership. I became more interested in this work because I've always seen the disconnect between girls' lived experiences and what the system acknowledges as leadership. So this builds on my earlier research, which I've already mentioned, and see, we've heard the voices of the women, but what are the girls saying? How do we connect this? How do we make sure that we have a just system that looks at leadership for just not women, but also for girls? So my current work is actually exploring how culturally responsive Indigenous frameworks can align policy, schooling, and leadership development with the lived experience of rural girls in Zambia. For me, it's a matter of urgency, especially when we talk about Agenda 2030 with, how are we going to see this happen? And that leadership becomes very key and very critical. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel. And last but definitely not least, Zainab, over to you.
Thank you. So as you mentioned, my name is Zainab. I have 20 years of experience working with teachers in Chile, Bolivia, Ecuador, Argentina, the United States, and I am a member of the Wichi people, that the traditional territories between the Pilcomayo and Bermejo rivers in the north of Argentina and south of Bolivia. For my people, for common Wichi people, being an indigenous woman means descending from the star, being a star woman, and choosing to come to live in this land. But in Argentina, being born an indigenous woman means dealing and confronting multiple layers of discrimination for being women, for being indigenous, for being rural, for being poor. So, for example, in my family history, my grandmother was deprived of the right for schooling and to learn to read and write. And my mother was forced to be schooled in Spanish. So my generation and my cousins, we had more opportunities, but didn't, we lost the language. So this shows the conflicted relationship between education and indigenous peoples in the region. It has only been recently through global movements of global indigeneity and local efforts by indigenous leaders that new policies have arrived to Argentina. And one of them is the intercultural bilingual education. So in the last 30 years, we started with 0 indigenous teachers, and now we have 4,000. 60% of them is estimated are women. This is a new event in the history of Argentina. So my research is around why, if we have this movement, still 2 out of 10 youth and indigenous children do not have access to education. And the quality is also in question. So I hope to share today some of the very interesting findings from teachers' insights and experiences about how can we transform and make this right to education and culturally relevant education better. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Zainab, and thank you again to all of you. I know that the work that you've been doing is really complex and difficult to present in just a few seconds. So appreciate that quick introduction, and now would love to dive into your findings a bit more. You all, as we were talking about what the theme should be and working to identify a common theme for this year's symposium, looking across the diverse work that you're doing and in the different contexts, the concept of justice, or this idea of just futures, really emerged as being something that unified all of the work that you were doing. So this seems like an important place to begin in talking about your research findings, right? We can't just assume that we know what just futures means for everyone. And really a first step in expanding justice in education seems to be understanding what just futures looks like to girls, to teachers, to communities. So Betty, I'll turn to you first on this question, but in your work with girls in northern Uganda, how did they define just futures? And maybe you could share with us what are some of the things that they are currently navigating on the road to those just futures?
Well, during my study, I had conversations with the girls, and they told me what a just future means to them. They had so many stories to tell me about what a just future means. One of them was that a just future means that their lived experiences. I already told you that these girls interface with a number of challenges. So these lived experiences, such as girls who have experienced gender-based violence, who have been married off early, they want to be part and parcel of decision-making processes, and policies should address their realities, especially the realities of young mothers. For example, you find girls who have given birth and they have children, but the policies are not addressing their real needs. For example, a girl who wants to breastfeed her child, the policy is not addressing her need. To her, a just future means that the policy should work to address her situation as a young mother. A just future, again, to these girls means that it equips them with the relevant skills, because we realize that some of the girls who even went to school come out without relevant skills to address their real life challenges. They have children, they need to make decisions, they need to make critical decisions about their lives. But the education system is talking about exams. So they want a future that equips them with skills that help them to navigate their day-to-day lives. The other thing that the girls talked about was that they want a future that centers their agency and promotes equity in education, and as well as their rights. So here they are saying that they want to speak out, they want to have the power, the capacity to manage their situation and to speak out and to be leaders. So that is the just futures that the girls are talking about. In a post-conflict, we see that girls live under a number of challenges that hinder their education trajectories. So these are some of the things that these girls are navigating. They have overlapping challenges. So a just future means that the education system is addressing these overlapping challenges. Many of these girls grow up in households that are recovering from conflict, where poverty, trauma, and weakened systems surround them, and they have so many responsibilities. They are giving birth early, they have to do domestic work, and then move long distances to school. So these are some of the things that limits their opportunities in school, and these are things that these girls are navigating. Yet along all these challenges that these girls have, we still see that these girls have determination and resilience. They continue to dream to be teachers, to be nurses, to be lawyers, so that they can help the community and help their families. As was said by one girl, I dream to return to school and complete my education so that I can be a lawyer to defend other girls. You can see these dreams. They have challenges, they have children, but these girls are continuing to dream. Overall, the lived experiences show that these girls are vulnerable, but they are very determined. Their dreams highlight why justice-oriented education is very essential for these girls, especially these girls who live or have facing systemic barriers, like in northern Uganda. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Betty, for this. And we are so much aligned in terms of looking at the complexities that face girls. For us, when I was talking to the girls in Zambia, Just Futures start with the girls' lived experiences, as Betty has already mentioned. And when we look at this, leadership is complex. And most of it, the girls were saying solutions must match girls' realities and not assumptions. We've noticed that when we talk about leadership, we are always assuming what girls need. But then looking at their girls' lived experiences, and it's showing like girls already lead every day in terms of what they were saying and sharing their stories when we're in the community, is that they care for siblings, they guide peers, they are problem solvers, and they're supporting their households. Their insights are evidence enough to show that they are already leading. And the girls' voices must be a starting point when we're talking about Just Future, especially when we talk about policy programming. Then, what does Just Futures look like? This is what the girls had to say. Uninterrupted schooling. They want to be free from early marriages. They want to be free from heavy labor, and they want to be free from safety risks. They want leadership beyond titles. Everyday leadership counts. They are saying teachers who see leaderships in all girls. And they're saying that we are teachers who see them and support them and create safe spaces. They want families, aunties, grandmothers to be partners in their leadership journeys. And then for us, Just Futures, when we are talking with the girls, is looking at a leadership model that has Indigenous and cultural lenses. And in terms of policy implications, what does Just Futures look like? We are saying building frameworks that recognize informal leadership. Looking at Indigenous and community leadership, that it does matter. Looking at relational leadership, aligning development and how girls already lead. What are the girls' stories? How are they leading? This is true transformation that we are seeing from the data. It is showing that the girls' lived experiences, even as Betty mentioned, they have been resilient even in the midst of difficulties. And when girls become the blueprint, we are going to see a system that will be more inclusive, that will be grounded culturally, and aligned to the lived experiences of the girls. And I feel like this, for us, and what the girls are saying is what a Just Future is, recognizing girls as current leaders and not future leaders.
Thank you so much, Betty and Rachel, for bringing in the girls' perspectives and voices here. Faith and Zainab, your research centers teachers and has connected with communities through that as well. So curious if you could share with us how teachers and communities in your research defined Just Futures. And again, what are they navigating as they work to promote Just Futures for and with the young people in their communities? Faith, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Jen. It's not surprising that what the teachers were saying and what the girls are saying are very aligned, because teachers are the closest to the learning process of all the learners. They are with the learners all the time. So teachers, when they were looking at Just Futures, they pointed to the issues of dignity, and opportunity being guaranteed, not just for few learners, but for all learners. So for them as teachers, it means having resources, training, and system support to teach responsively and ensure participation for every child. In our conversations with the teachers, we focused mainly on how gender-responsive teaching methods can assist in creating just futures. And the teachers were so clear from their experiences that teaching in a responsive way holds so much promise for education. So it is crucial for every teacher to be exposed to these teaching methods which are gender responsive. This will help the education system to achieve the big vision we have in all our contexts, and this whole 2030 big agenda of quality, inclusive, and equitable education for all the learners. So teachers do believe that if unique needs and experiences of students are recognized based on their gender, they can create a more inclusive and welcoming classroom environment where all the students feel valued and respected and can be able to thrive. So teachers being closest to the process, if we center them through structured teacher professional development, in gender responsive teaching methods, we definitely ensure all the learners will fully be supported through their learning processes. In Zimbabwe, we have more than 5 million learners in the school system, and over 150 teachers are in the teacher service. So just futures will be a reality if all these teachers have the skills and we have the skills they need to be able to create a very inclusive learning environment for each and every one of the learners without leaving any one of them behind. Because currently this is happening, but it's happening in some schools and not all schools. So just futures will mean every child being on this journey with their teachers supporting them all the way. Thank you, Jen.
I'm always inspired by the common thread in our work, even across countries and continents. So in my case, for Indigenous teachers, Just Futures has to do with respect for Indigenous knowledges and respect for diversity, and also a level of participation in building our futures. And I can share one story about one teacher that I named Chishi to illustrate the findings of my research. This name means the star of dawn. It means the planet Venus. So Chishi went to elementary school and it was okay. She didn't have much problems. But when she entered high school, she had one teacher that felt that discriminated her a lot, and mocked her and made fun of her. And it was so hard for her that she dropped out of school. She couldn't force herself to continue. Then she had kids. And when their kids were a little bit older and she moved to a bigger town, she decided to continue her studies. So I met her as a teacher. And what truly moved me was how the efforts and commitment that she had for Indigenous languages to teach them, but also to create nurturing environments for all children, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, or criollos, as they're called in Argentina. So Chishi explained to me that she didn't want others to suffer the way that she did. So for me, this is a capacity to transform painful experiences to nurturing ones that shows the transformative agency of Indigenous women's teachers. And this transformative agency has a past orientation in the sense that it is connected to the struggles, the challenges, the achievements of previous generations. And they always mention a grandmother, a great-grand uncle that inspire them dreams of a better future and encourage them through the sacrifices and the effort that it took them to become teachers, but also has a future orientation because they're able to see how Indigenous values nurture a sense of identity in youth. And they have the hope that these values can protect youth from the corrosive forces. Teachers are very worried about the level of addiction, early and unwanted pregnancy, the violence of poverty. So Just Futures for these teachers means a future based on respect and recognition of Indigenous values, and also the values of interconnectedness, trust, and a collaborative manner of working, and the participation to decide on our own futures.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I have to say that I've been with you in this journey for the past 6 months, but again today I'm always really compelled by what you're talking about in the sharing that that is coming out of the research that you're doing. And all of your research starts with an understanding, right? And really doing that deep work to understand the knowledge, perspectives, as you said, the lived experiences of girls, teachers, communities. But your research isn't just about recognizing or acknowledging those realities, but really understanding them as a starting point for a broader systemic or more transformative change, as you just mentioned, Zainab. So I'm curious, maybe we could talk a little bit about what this sort of link between lived experience and systemic change has looked like in your research, what you're learning about what's happening, what could be happening. And Faith, let's start with you for this one.
Yes, indeed, Jane, a great question and a complex one, quite a complex one too. So starting with lived experiences for teachers means listening deeply to their realities and what they've been going through and what has been happening in their lives, and using then those insights to drive systemic change. Actually, teacher professional development and gender-responsive pedagogy implementation, they are systemic issues. They are a critical part of any education system reform. So from talking to the teachers, what makes gender-responsive pedagogy in this instance promising is not just the isolated practices. It's when the structures, relationships, and mindsets align and work together. And key factors across the systems like the school leadership, use of resources, availability of materials, and family engagement all work together for gender-responsive pedagogy to really be fully implemented in classrooms and teachers to do what they need to do for learners to learn better. So these factors can easily be clustered into 3 categories, if you want, which are structural, relational, and the teacher's mindsets and attitudes. Talking about the structural factors, structured and formal teacher training builds understanding of gender-responsive teaching methods for the teachers, and it does improve classroom practices. Teachers' understanding is critical, and that understanding comes from intentional and not intentional training, because teachers don't graduate from teacher training colleges with some of these skills like gender-responsive pedagogy skills. So policies which guide and support teachers are quite key. And in my conversation with the teachers, existence of these guidelines combined with effective training really help teachers to implement better because they know how to do it. And resources too was key for them, because with gender responsive principles being embedded in the teaching and learning materials they use, it makes it much, much easier for the teachers to be able to do it. And when we're talking about the relational factors, the teachers pointed out to the school leadership and community engagement aspects. It was reported by the teachers that implementation improves when leadership champions gender-responsive pedagogy, for example, at the school level. They actually act as the bridge from the schools to the communities, and that allows then teachers to be the transformative agents they need to be. Teachers' mindsets shift as well when they go through effective training. They thrive when they are supported by their peers and they are challenging each other on the gender norms, which can be internalized in their own minds. And that way it helps. So the continuous teacher professional development at school level helps them with the continuous journey of mindset shifts. But currently, from talking to the teachers, it seems that the training is fragmented, is donor-driven, and is not reaching all the teachers. And that limits the implementation in all the classrooms in Zimbabwe. So Just Futures requires intentional and systemic alignment of all our initiatives and efforts. So this speaks to the structures, to the relationships and the mindsets all working together. And policies obviously need to move from, this big ambition, which we might be having on the paper, but to really ensuring that there is classroom practice and teachers are supported to implement fully. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faith. You've really raised so much important insights when talking about just futures. You've mentioned about structure, relation, and mindset alignment. And then this takes me back to the research that we are currently doing with the girls. And you also mentioned about intentionality and system in alignment. When we talked about girls and girls leadership, getting their stories, it meant doing, leadership, as I continue to say, is such a complex matter. And most instances, girls have never been the center of this discussion. So what we are learning from this research and what insights we got even when we collected data is that when systems ignore how girls lead, solutions then are designed for girls may not, for instance, do not match their lived realities on how they practice leadership, on how they take their journey of leadership, and also the inclusion of the values. So when we started from lived experiences, we looked at how do girls lead? What are the challenges and barriers that they face? And how are these programs in terms of policies and the school systems, as well as the community and family systems, are aligned to this? And it's very important to note that leadership programs should be more relevant and culturally grounded to be sustainable, to be able to suit into this. So what this looks like in practice is that, number one, expanding leadership beyond titles is what we are hearing. Most of these girls lead even when they don't have formal titles. The recognition of relational qualities like care, teamwork, responsibility, and initiative should be considered as genuine leadership. Supporting teachers. I know, Faith, you've been talking about teachers and gender-responsive pedagogies, and it also aligns to how the girls feel like the teachers need to identify leadership in all girls, not only the outspoken ones. And then creating safe spaces in schools and community spaces. Again, I'm just thinking of how, Faith, you are bringing about the importance of teachers and the gender pedagogy approach. Here, the girls are saying, we want creating school and community spaces that practice leadership confidently. And then the engagement of parents, grandmothers, and community women as true partners in leadership development. Because when we talk to the girls, these were the elders, these were adults that have been supporting their leadership journey. So in this research that we are really exploring, we are saying real transformation will happen when girls' lived experiences becomes the foundation of how we design policies, of how we work on it. When we design policies from the girls' lived experiences, we build systems that truly recognize and support the leadership that girls are already holding today. Thank you.
Thank you. In my case, one of the first findings has been to see this new social actor, this transformative Indigenous women's teachers. And talking to them through storytelling interview, I was able to see some of the challenges and supports that they receive in their educational journey. So they also mentioned structural challenges and injustices such as distance and lack of resources, and also male-dominated public spaces that don't build the confidence in them to participate in those spaces. This is at the social level. At the community level, although teachers report egalitarian childhood practices, when we went deeper with the conversations, we saw that very soon women and girls are burdened by domestic chores and by early pregnancy and marriage and motherhood. And there are concerns about safety and gender-based violence that prevent them from continuing their studies. And at the individual level, all teachers related instances of discrimination. They felt as students and also now in the professional spaces. And at the root of this is a mindset that thinks of people as inferior and superior, and cultures are better and worse, and also of genders, one being better than the other one. What I found really interesting in my conversations, very enriching, were conversations about cultural maintenance and change. So let me share a quick example. around the practice of menstruation. The first period in a girl's life is a very important event that traditionally meant that the girl stayed for 1 month in bed or in the home, changed her diet, had to avoid going close to the river. Teachers teach these practices, but they've seen that students are not doing it and the families are losing this practice. But in deeper conversations, at the heart of it, what this practice had was a space for the girls to talk to their grandmothers and talk about their identity and the community they belong to and their responsibilities as an adult in the community, as a responsible adult. So at the heart of this cultural practice, there is an important cultural values and identity that communities, I think we are invited to think through and see what are we maintaining and what are we changing according to current conditions and the need for girls not to have limiting beliefs so they can continue go to school and continue advancing in the educational journey. So this has been really enriching conversations with many Indigenous teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab, for sharing those deep insights from your work. In my study, the lived experiences of girls show that they have dreams, aspirations, like I said earlier, to become teachers, nurses, police women, and their dreams are not merely about their personal ambitions, but their dreams go more of a collective yearning for dignity, equality, and social justice within the systems that have long marginalized them. So they want to change the way the systems are. They want these positions, in my community, they call them big positions. So these girls are dreaming big so that they are able to transform the way society is treating them. They want to see change in the whole system. So the girls' aspirations are not just for themselves, like I said, but it is for a whole system change in their community. Second, the lived realities, experiences of these girls show that they have needs, and their needs are categorized into two, practical and strategic. And these needs go together. They cannot be provided in isolation of the other. Practical needs are needs such as menstrual products or menstrual hygiene products, food, among others, and strategic needs are things like leadership, opportunities, protection from abuse or gender-based violence, rights awareness, and having relevant skills. A girl cannot exercise her agency if she lacks food or school fees, and she cannot sustain her business without confidence or having these digital skills. Nowadays, people use phones, you have to go to the bank. These are the skills that the girls are talking about. And I want to quote one girl who said, "I still dream of going back to school to become a journalist, but I cannot afford pads or books. You can see." These are things that limits these girls' abilities or limits their opportunities in education. So transformative change, therefore, requires holistic, integrated support, not separated, not in silos, but they should be part and parcel of girls' aspirations. Thirdly, my research shows that the support system for girls' or dreams or aspiration does exist, though it is fragmented. Girls depend on the family, the teachers or local community leaders, NGOs, and government. While these systems support them, they are sometimes inconsistent, short-term, and often based on goodwill rather than structure. As one girl put it, if you succeed, you need to know the right people. This means that the system is not working for them. The issue is not that the support is missing. The support is there. It is that the system is not connected to supporting these girls' aspiration. The system is leaving them behind. So a true transformative system treats girls' lived experiences as a guidance for policy and programs. Most importantly, it makes girls' agency the starting point for change, not an end goal. In short, lived experiences are not just stories, but they are blueprints, like Rachel said, for systemic transformation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eddie. I'm going to pick up off of what you said there in the end of really engaging, right, the agency, right? And that should be the goal in many ways. And that's come out in the research across all of the 4 different projects that you all are working on is, within any effort to do systemic change, the critical need to engage the people who are at the center as transformative agents. And you all have talked about that in different ways today and in your research. I'm curious if you could share with us today anything that you've found as that you would identify as a promising practice or a promising policy or ways relationships are changing that are really engaging girls or teachers as agents, as these transformative agents in building more just futures for themselves and more broadly. So, if you can share sort of what you found, what these promising practices might look like and how they could be leveraged maybe to become more widespread. I think Zainab, why don't we start with you this time?
Yes. I have to acknowledge that Argentina now is a very hard context, a very adverse context. And against this background, a lot is happening on the ground. And I want to illustrate it with 3 examples. One about the empowered teachers, collaborations, and the co-creation of an alternative educational model. So the first one, in all the teachers that I talked to, they were doing wonderful things, creating new materials, organizing events, participating in networks. One has a traditionally dance group that she started, giving free language courses, leading projects. So truly, with that preparation, teachers are multiplying the effect of their activities. Second, there is a very interesting interplay between the national policy and the local policy in some provinces. For example, in the north of Argentina, where I live, the province of Chaco, there was a partnership between researchers and practitioners led by Dr. Unamuno and Uncaos University, where they call it Proyecto Egresados. They interview teachers and ask them about their needs, indigenous teachers, and then they propose an educational program that is a complementary level between the tertiary degree that they have and a bachelor's degree. And teachers were very grateful because it came from their own needs. And third, another experience in another province, this is Salta. The coordination of intercultural bilingual education there is promoting spaces to talk about curriculum development. So in this first iteration, there are many similarities between that curriculum and a traditional one, but it's creating capacity to think and imagine a very different educational system. For example, based on the values of interconnectedness or wholeness in indigenous knowledges, to be less fragmented and to be more oriented to respect nature and the relationship among people. So these are some of a few examples of many things that are happening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zainab. Looking at what Zainab has just shared, about empowerment, collaboration, and co-creation, there is a lot of pockets of, promise that we can see, which the girls really shared in this research. I think the thing for me, which I'm looking at, is they did identify, like, they have supportive teachers. They also identified community women as natural mentors with whom they were able to go there and lead, such as aunties, church women, and grandmothers. They also talked about informal, mentorship as a powerful way that they was able to show, and the girls specifically supporting one another. But now coming to the policy concept, we're looking at the National Gender Policy for 2023. We find like already it's a pocket of promise because it identifies education as a priority area and calls for equitable participation. It's also committed to multi-sectoral coordination, which opens up space for partnership between schools, communities, NGOs, as well as traditional leaders. And I believe that because of the way the girls lead, this becomes also an opportunity. And when we look at the national policy, which is looking at traditional leadership and community structures, this becomes very critical in terms of shifting harmful norms and enabling girls' development. This provides a formal entry point as to where we can elevate, community-led practices that the girls are really sharing, in their stories.
Thank you, Rachel. In my case, I found so many pockets of hope or promises, but I'll share a few of them. At the family level, the girls get a lot of support, such as financial help, childcare support, and guidance. I remember one girl saying that my mother takes care of my baby when I go to school. These everyday acts of care make education possible for many girls in this context. The other promise of hope was community and informal networks, which continue to offer mentorship, motivation, and through fireside gathering, saving groups, local initiatives that give girls spaces to share and build their economic independence. The other that I want to share are the existing policies in Uganda, such as the teenage reentry guidelines that hold promise for many girls, especially the teenage mothers, can now return to school and learn. The Presidential Skilling Initiative is another that contain elements of skilling. All these are frameworks that, if really implemented, could make education truly transformative for many girls in this context. So these pockets of hope show that justice-oriented future is emerging every day through relationship, practices, policies surrounding these girls. What is needed now is to strengthen them, to scale them, and to decentralize them so that these support systems can happen in these girls' lives, especially in the northern Uganda, so that they can strive, not just because of chance, but because it is well designed for them. The system is working for them. Thank you.
In Zimbabwe, when I spoke to the teachers, I did also find some pockets of good practice. I was not too shocked because I was educated in rural Zimbabwe, and I've always known that teachers are committed to education. But what I've realized is that what makes these pockets of good practice promising is not just the isolated practices I observed or we are seeing. It's when the system learn from these working models and leverage to scale. So teachers are actually teaching in a gender responsive way when they receive training, and it is transforming classrooms. They are seeking to deliver learning in a way which will embrace every learner whenever they have the skills to do this. Out of the 189 teachers I spoke to, 57% of them had been trained in gender responsive pedagogy by the ministry and its partners. And it was heartwarming to see that they were not just trained and they went back to sit. They were implementing what they've been trained. They had internalized it. Their mindsets have shifted. They were handling classrooms differently, and they were actually seeing the difference it was making within the classroom. Talking to the various teachers, they could articulate various examples of how they were doing this in the classroom in terms of making the classrooms inclusive, using focus group discussions, identifying the needs of people, and ensuring that the guidance they have in the policies they are putting into practice. So it is clear that when we invest into the teachers, when we center the teachers, and when we offer them structured teacher professional development, like in gender responsive pedagogy, actually they do something in the classrooms, and every learner, regardless of wherever they are, they can be able to benefit. I spoke to 189 teachers from 9 different districts, which included both rural and urban. And within those, you could see that teaching in a gender responsive way was happening in all those schools. Whenever the teachers are supported and the materials are available, the community and the school leadership are working together. So, Jen, we do have these pockets of good practice in gender responsive teaching and practices, and implementation can actually be able to happen if we train every teacher, and we can be able to have every learner benefiting from this. So the policies need to just be able to help us to ensure that this is just not for the few learners, but for every learner. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. It's so important to identify, right, and to make visible those pockets of promise, as you all have said, and really, give us the hope and the motivation and the knowledge, right, that things are happening, and what we need to do is to continue to leverage those and to expand that change more broadly. So towards that end, we're bringing our conversation to a close today, and want to thank you all again. I think you've really shared, in this brief space, what you have been learning with the girls and with the teachers and with community members about what justice looks like, and not only what it might look like, but really this need to have the idea of a just future be grounded in local context, be part of an ongoing conversation that incorporates the past and visions of the future, and that very importantly happens with other actors across the ecosystem, and at these multiple levels that you've talked about in terms of wanting to make systemic change, the structural level, this relational level, this level of mindsets. So, as we move to the end of this conversation, and if I were to give you each 1 minute maximum to move us into action, what does your research say needs to be done moving forward? Who needs to take action, and what do they need to do? And Rachel, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, thank you so much, Jen. Moving forward, we're looking at policy and practice to be aligned to center girls' lived experiences because they are bringing in so much in terms of the value of leadership. So there are three key areas I'm looking at. Number one, Ministry of Education, to really define a national gender-responsive leadership framework that recognizes relational community-rooted leadership. Secondly, school leaders and teachers to create structured leadership opportunities for girls within clubs, classrooms, and school governance, as well as to recognize and reward girls' everyday leadership. And then to the traditional leaders and community structures where these girls are practicing their leadership is to publicly support girls' education and leadership and protection, including prevention of early marriages, as well as partner with schools to validate Indigenous leadership practices such as the Ubuntu philosophy as one of the frameworks that they can consider. In short, collect evidence that is going to inform policy refinement that is going to work with the girls. Thank you.
Two things for me, Jen, for Zimbabwe. We do have a very big opportunity with the education curriculum reform, which is ongoing. So we can be able to ride on that and ensure that we institutionalize gender-responsive pedagogy. And by this, I mean that we reform the pre-service curriculum and integrate gender-responsive pedagogy in there, but also have a very structured way of training the teachers who are in service. And we need to ensure that we have got standardized modules and we have got the assessment tools for that so that we have consistency across the board for all our teachers. And to enable us to do that, the second thing we can be able to do quickly and easily is to have a costed national continuous professional development strategy. And within that, not just a document, but we need to include funding mechanisms. We also need to make sure that we have got very clear timelines of when we are going to be able to train all our teachers and ensure that we have got a very clear monitoring and evaluation system. And this can be able to act as a canvas for us. And for me, these two key things, they already align with the very big education reforms which we are doing in the country.
For me, there's three things. We need conversations about purpose, and this has to transform in an institutional project. We need at the core is pedagogy, and this can be led by Indigenous women's teachers, the curriculum, the materials, the practices. And third, we need also to work on mindsets. And this is a collective responsibility to change these racist beliefs and these gender limiting beliefs. Thank you.
Zainab, just to add on, in my case, I have many recommendations for multiple actors, including community, parents, ministries of education and gender, but I want to highlight two recommendations. One, it is important for the Ministry of Education and Sports to make reforms in the education curriculum, especially to integrate relevant skills based on the lived realities of learners and to ensure implementation of guidelines such as the Teenage Mothers Reentry Guidelines. It is very important that it is implemented and resourced. Secondly, the Ministry of Gender, Labor, and Social Development needs to invest resources and run awareness campaigns to shift gender norms and reduce stigma, especially for young mothers and girls who face systemic barriers, foster community and family engagement to support the dreams of these girls. So I stop here because I have so many, but which can be read in my policy brief. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty, and thank you, everyone, for the very quick round of action. Our time here has been short, but we really hope for everyone who has joined us that this has provided a taste of the important research that the Echidna Scholars have been leading from Argentina and Uganda to Zambia and Zimbabwe. We hope that you're hooked and you want to know more. And we have just the perfect opportunity for that. This plenary conversation is just the beginning of our 3-day symposium. So please join us for workshops to be held over the next 2 days. Each of our scholars will be hosting a deep dive, interactive virtual workshop into their specific research topic, with the participation of really an extraordinary group of international and national actors that will help them explore their findings and recommendations in more detail. So Faith and Rachel will be doing workshops on Zimbabwe and Zambia on December 3rd tomorrow, and Betty and Zainab will be sharing their work from Uganda and Argentina on December 4th. You can find more information and register for these events on the symposium event page on the Brookings website. And a final reminder, a final plug here, that the deadline to apply for the 2026 Echidna Global Scholars Fellowship is coming up in 13 days, December 15th. Please visit the Brookings webpage for more information. Please consider applying. Please share with someone that you think would be a great Echidna scholar. And thank you once again for joining us today. We can't wait to see you again, hopefully in our virtual workshops or somewhere along our road of working towards gender equality in and through education together. Take care.